growing up as a youngster, my dad became friends with a fellow named Frank Zajac. And Frank was convinced that just as he had all of these chickens and fancy ducks, that we too, at our house, should have some chickens and some ducks and maybe even some geese. So for a while we ended up with these bantam hens and these fancy ducks out in our yard. Now, my brother and I tended to enjoy going out there. However, one of these fancy ducks was not exactly the nicest duck in the world. And oftentimes we would go out into the yard to the greeting of this duck coming at us full bore with wings outstretched, saying, "Get out of here. This is my territory." As little kids, it was scary. And there were those incredibly wonderful bantam hens that would create their nest with the eggs and would sit on top of them, and then they would hatch, and we would have little chicks running around the yard. But again, you did not want to get too close to those bantam hens when the chicks were around, because they were sure to let you know that you were in their space, and they would gather the chicks under their wings and protect them. As we gather this day here in the season of Lent, we come and we hear of this Jesus who is on his journey to Jerusalem. We hear of this one who has been going throughout Nazareth, who has been going throughout Galilee and Judea, and now has come to a landing place. And interestingly, as we encounter this lectionary text, we have a group of Pharisees coming to him. Now, oftentimes, as soon as we hear the word Pharisees, our antennas go up and we anticipate that these are the bad guys. The ones who are causing problems for Jesus and that we should automatically not like. But as we encounter them here in the scripture passage, here are a group of Pharisees coming to Jesus out of protection. Go away, Herod wants to kill you. And perhaps their own self-interest. That they realize that Jesus is out there agitating those that are in power, and they are wanting things to calm down or quiet down a little bit. And we like to imagine who these Pharisees might be coming. Perhaps Nicodemus is there with them, this one that we will encounter again. These people who are looking after Jesus and trying their best to look after the people of Jerusalem and Judea. And they come inviting him to leave. Sneak away, go away. Don't let Herod kill you. Jesus counters them. He lays out his plan. I'm going to be teaching and curing. I am on the road to Jerusalem. I've got 3 days. Watch and see what is going to happen. Jesus invites the Pharisees and those around him to come with, and not only does he say that he's not going to listen to their advice around Herod, but he ups the game. He says, "Go and tell that fox." He's not being nice. Jesus is looking at the political powers that are in place and is calling them out, saying that perhaps they are sly and conniving. Perhaps they are not as caring for the people as they should be, and that he is going to keep taking them to task over the course of the coming days and is not going to let Herod or those around him get by with what has been taking place. This is a time of unsettling. And I can't help but imagine Jesus being like that fancy duck out in the yard, saying, "This is my territory. These are my people. Don't cross the threshold." Jesus is coming at them full bore and is laying out that there is a plan in place and there are people that he is going to protect to the very end. Then he goes on and talks about Jerusalem. And these are harsh words, not just about a political leader, but about the people, the citizens of Jerusalem. And perhaps this is a place where we struggle because it also becomes a word that challenges us. Jesus says he's going into Jerusalem, and this is the city that stones its prophets. This is the city that does not listen time and time again, that gets so caught up in what it means to be a little seat of power within this larger empire, that gets so caught up in the way that they might fill their bellies or pat themselves on the back. And he's calling the people, the citizens, out to say, just as Herod is dangerous and conniving as a fox, so the people don't listen to the prophetic people who are coming into their midst. They are not listening to the prophets who proclaim a word of hope and life and who challenge the systems that are in place. But that doesn't stop him. He keeps this march going into Jerusalem with a hope, a promise, that he might gather these chicks under his wings. A beautiful image, not unlike that little bantam hen. That there might be all of these chicks protected safely under the wings. Oftentimes today, when we hear these words, we think of what it means to be gathered under the cross of Christ. What it means for us to come as followers of Jesus who continue to be enveloped in these arms outstretched that provide a word of grace and hope for us, a word of challenge, a word of mercy, a word of peace. Saying that these arms encapsulate you, all of you. And there's something wonderful and beautiful about that image. And then we realize who we're stuck with. We look around and we realize that there are people who do irritate us, that we get angry with. That there are people who aren't always that nice. And that we have to share this space under the wings with them. That God's mercy and God's grace is not just for me and my best friends or the family that I like hanging out with, but that it extends outward, inviting us in and holding us close. So as we reflect on Paul calling the community the crown and joy, what does it really mean for us to look around and be gathered under Jesus' wings? Look around this sanctuary. These incredible, beautiful, glorious people of God who are messed up and who make messes in their lives and in other people's lives. People who can be cranky some days. People who can be loving, to show up with a salad or a hot dish. People who don't show up for meetings. And people who will go out of their way to make sure that every single person is thought of with a birthday card or a celebratory email or note. The people who take and chafe your hide some days. When you say, oh, how could they say that or do that? And yet they come together and they sing of God's glory in this place. Or they call you up on the telephone and say, I noticed you haven't been in church for a couple of weeks. You want to talk? There are all of those opportunities, and we end up under these wings together. And we follow Jesus. Knowing that this ragtag group of people, in all of our glory and messiness, is on the way with Jesus to the cross. that becomes part of our Lenten story, our springtime story. That together as a community, we make our way into Jerusalem and we join with Jesus in speaking a word, a prophetic word to the people. To say that here in this place and in this time, God's wings extend even further. That here in this place and in this time, God invites us to take on the foxes of this world who are so filled with themselves and the political powers or the monetary powers that exist, and to call them out as foxes, which threaten the lives of people, good, caring, wonderful, broken people. That here in this place and in this time, we walk with Jesus into that place, knowing that the destination is the cross. That Jesus goes to that place in front of Herod and Pilate, in front of the whole of the Roman Empire, and is willing to say that I love each and every one of these wonderful and screwed up people, and for them I will die. For God's world, I will die. Because under my wings, I want them to rest secure. That their sins are no longer counted against them. That God's mercy is so incredible and such a wonderful gift that it breaks open the hearts and the lives of every person. And he calls out again to us today, come. Come and take refuge. Because I am willing to protect and to go to the cross for you. Now, as progressive Christians, we often bump up against that. And I think this becomes our own hubris. We like to do things on our own, or think that God's justice now rests in our hands. Or that perhaps, even though we really trust in God's grace, that our works sure do help a whole lot, or move us a little bit closer to God's kingdom here and now and into eternity. And it is precisely here where we are challenged to come back to these wings outstretched. To say our works for justice, our prayers for love and community, our living certainly do help to bring the kingdom, but at the end of the day, it is God's wings and God's arms outstretched on the cross that are our saving grace. Not one thing that we do merits salvation. And yet, God holds us fast. So today, fancy ducks flocking out, protecting their territory, and bantam hens, arms encapsulating us, invite us to hear and experience this prodigal God. This God who lavishes a prophetic word of challenge on us in our living and in our hope. A prodigal God who will not let us go, but holds us fast. And in that we rest secure this day, throughout our Lenten journey, and into the ages of ages. Thanks be to God for this promise, for this witness that holds us fast.